All right, so we are going to talk about the Mayas. Now, why are we talking about the Mayas in U.S. history? Because their culture has influence over the Native Americans in our culture. So, plus it is part of their domain was North America. Granted, it was in Mexico, so they occupied southern Mexico, Guatemala, and northeastern Belize. But we're going to go over them and just get a feel for where our Native American ancestry might have picked up on as well. So the Mayas were populated from about 250 CE to about 900 CE. So that doesn't sound like very long. It's like 650 years. But keep in mind, the US, we've only been around for about a little over 200 years. So say pretty significant. It's still kicking our booty right now as far as long lasting. All right, so a little bit about the Mayas. They were heavily influenced by the Olmec culture. So the Mayas shared a lot of the same things. They were polytheistic, so they worshipped multiple gods, and they definitely worshipped the nature gods. So another thing that's important to know about them is prior to about the mid 1800s, we thought the Mayas were like this super peaceful tribe that was very cultural and more sophisticated, unlike the Aztec the Aztec Indians. However, after excavating some of their ruins and temples and discovering being able to read their hieroglyphics, which is their writing, we see that they were, while they might not have been as cutthroat, they still they warred with neighboring cities. Now, they warred with neighboring cities, and they would take the rulers of those other cities when they won, and they would hold them captive. And sometimes they would even sacrifice those people to their gods. So just like other early American Indian tribes, the Mayas also did human sacrifice. Now, there's several reasons why they might have declined, but before their decline, they were very good in math. They understood astronomy very well. They created a calendar. They were an agricultural community. They worked with corn, and also known as maize, and lima beans, many plants, so that they weren't strictly a meat-based diet. So that's something that was very interesting about them, because they had definitely moved away from that paleo Native American, paleo Indian facet of life. Now, with that, they also were very good with their hands. They were artisans, so they could work with sculptures. They built big pyramids, but they also had regular buildings. So they had pyramids, and usually when we think about ancient peoples, we think pyramids, but they actually had regular buildings as well. And while they worked hard, they obviously enjoyed play, because they even had courts for playing ball. So yes, they might have been hard workers, but they had to cut loose every now and again. Now, they also enjoyed or were skillful at working with gold and copper, which is pretty interesting, because that takes a lot of heat to be able to manipulate that, and especially like how we do in modern jewelry. But they were able to manipulate and use gold and copper, which means they were able to mine it, refine it so that they could use it, and create molds, all kinds of things that are pretty sophisticated, especially considering the lack of tools they had. It's not like they could go fire up that propane torch or that, electric engraver. No, they really had to work at it. And think about all the details. Think about when you're cutting something with a knife. It takes more than that to cut through gold and copper. And if you're making jewelry, that has to be very detailed. So you're going to have it sharp, and you're going to have to keep it sharp. So even though it sounds so minute, that's something that would require a lot of work, and for them to invest the time in that is pretty significant as well. They did have their own form of paper, and they created their own books. Their books were made out of paper from the interior parts of fig trees, and the books are called codices. Now, some of the reasons why they might have declined in survival is because of deforestation, drought, which might have been directly related to the war over river distributions. So the way people were maneuvering and creating streams off the main riverbanks. So that definitely would play into drought. And then because they would have wars and battles with neighboring civilizations, their native cultures, and opposing Maya cultures, they would also fight over the waterways and the trade routes, whether they were water or land. So those were something that was pretty significant. Now, at the height of their power, they had over 40 major cities and about 2 million people in their community. So, I mean, definitely for an early generation, that's a very significant. So you might think, oh, well, being a ruler back then probably was pretty sweet. But because of their religious beliefs of the nature gods and then the regular people, whoever was ruler, so if they had to sacrifice people so for the gods to have human blood, guess what? Being ruler meant they had to torture themselves, and they had to do bloodletting for the gods so that the gods would approve of their rule and benefit their rule and the people during that time. So while being ruler could be cool, and you have the best food that's available, all of that, that's a lot of worry, a lot of stress. And also, oh, by the way, I have to go bloodlet today. I've got a meeting today at the doctor's office to bloodlet. Yeah, that's not exactly like a moment, at least not to me. So, in summary, the Mayas were extremely sophisticated in many ways. They were still polytheistic, so they worshiped multiple gods, mainly nature gods. They did human sacrifice. They had a mathematic, an astrological, and a calendar system. They had a linguistic system where they could communicate and write, and they created their own books, worked with stone, limestone, creating buildings and pyramids, and they also worked with finer metals like gold and copper. So overall, super cool. And you can still visit and see some of their earlier civilizations, some of their earlier places that they built up. They're preserved in Mexico, Guatemala, and some in Belize, but several of them are in Mexico. So I hope you find this interesting. I think it's super cool to learn about all this. I'm also super glad that I don't live in a sacrificing community. Whew. I wouldn't be making the video. I'd be out for the count. So take care, and I will see you on the next video. If you like this, you're going to love what you can experience in the Light Up Literature curriculum. So I hope to see you in the family soon.